This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Monday, July 31st, 2006, and this is episode number 133 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm Matt Hochberg from MGMstudios.org. On the show today is a man who would cry at any moment if he hears the Wishes soundtrack, Mike Scopa of MousePlanet.com. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, rubbish. You have no power here. Be gone before someone drops a house on you, too.
Have you used that one before?
Okay, let me use another one. How about this? Ooh la la, so that's the Norwegian doing the hoochie coochie, Dad?
And rounding out our panel today is little Mikey Newell of Mouse World Radio. Happy birthday, Mike.
Howdy ho, Matt. Happy birthday.
On today's show, we're discussing ways to stay cool at Walt Disney World, being that August is upon us. Many people are going to Walt Disney World, and unlike little frigid Connecticut where I'm from, it stays warm in Walt Disney World throughout later in the year. I mean, the summer doesn't just end on Labor Day over there, does it, Mike Scopa?
Nope. Keeps going and going and going and going.
And so what we've decided to do is come up with some tips for staying cool in the parks, going around and figuring out how you can browse the parks and be able to not sweat it all out. So let's start out. I'm going to give you guys first one of my tips for staying cool, and that's of course to perfect the Superman pose, and that is standing legs apart, hands on your hips, with your elbows jetted out, such that the least amount of body is touching other parts of your body, thus reducing the amount of sweat possible. So you'll, after a few hours in the park, I'm sure you'll also perfect that. But Mike Scopa, why don't you give us something a little more practical?
There are some, not that was impractical. There are so many things to say, and a lot of it is just common sense. One of the things that everyone should take advantage of during the summertime is the extra magic hour mornings, because in the morning it'll be the coolest of the hours of the day. Trying to get to the parks very early. Try to do whatever you need to do before mid-morning, because those extra magic hour mornings will also draw more people, and the more people in a park, the warmer it seems to be. So the first thing to do is to try to get to the parks as early as possible during the summer and do whatever you want to do as far as attractions at that time of the day. Also, what you want to do is you want to do the outside attractions during the morning hours. Save the indoor attractions for the afternoons if you happen to be in the parks in the afternoons. Why? Because the indoor attractions will have air conditioning. You won't need the air conditioning as much in the morning as you would in the afternoon. So here's the tip. The tip is do the outdoor attractions in the morning and the indoor attractions in the afternoon. But I'd also go as far to say that I would avoid being in a theme park between the hours of noon and 4 to 4:30 in the summer, because it's really, really hot.
Some real great tips right there, Mike Scopa. And we should mention that the average daily high in Walt Disney World, I mean, July and August we expect it to be hot. The average high is 92 degrees with lows in the 73 degrees. But really, it stays very hot. In September, it's 90 degrees is the average high. In October, the average high is 84. So really, until you get to about October, you're really not seeing a significant dip in temperature. And to go along with what Scopa said, one of my favorite tips to do is in the afternoon at the studios, I like to do the air conditioning tour, where I go from Great Movie Ride to Sounds Dangerous to Star Tours to Muppet Vision to One Man's Dream. And if you do that, I mean, that'll kill an hour, 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours probably, and it's minimizing the amount of air conditioning or rather maximizing the amount of air conditioning that you're experiencing, and it just makes it just so much easier on you if you can avoid those hours in the sun, just like Mike Scopa was mentioning before. Mike Newell, do you have anything to share?
One of our favorite things to do is if you're lucky enough to stay at a hotel or a resort with a freezer, is to get a bunch of little water bottles, maybe from Goodings or one of the supermarkets nearby, and freeze them the night before. And when you bring them out as frozen bottles during the course of the day, they tend to melt, and you have ice cold water around with you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not only that. I mean, the water is still cold, as you move to the afternoon hours. Whereas if you just refrigerate a bottle, it'll probably, if you put it in your bag or whatever, it'll probably be room temperature or air temperature, whatever that may be, by about 11 o'clock in the morning. But if you freeze it solid, you'll
Right.
still have cold water going into the afternoon.
Exactly, and it's clean, good cold water. It's not like the water they have at the water fountains there.
There's someone, I don't know if it was a question that's a listener had sent in or that we've answered or that's coming up, but someone had mentioned that the water table and the ability, you have to choke down the water in the water fountains that are available.
Yeah.
But of course, while we're talking about water, you want to also keep in mind that regardless of what you drink, you need to stay hydrated.
Absolutely.
I mean, just keep drinking. You may not even feel, you might not be quote unquote thirsty, but it's important to keep drinking, especially in those summer hours. Air conditioning alone isn't going to do it, especially considering that air conditioning, there's no humidity in the air, so it takes more out of you, if anything, because of how air conditioning works. Let's move on to parades. Mike Scopa, do you have any tips for viewing the parades in the summertime?
Well, a lot of these tips that we spew forth are from our own experience and from things that worked and what didn't work. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that when you're taking photographs of the parades, you like to have the sun behind you. And if you are on that side of the parade route in which the sun is behind you, then most likely you're going to be in the shade. So what I would suggest to everyone who is planning to go over the next month or so and who loves those daytime parades, of course we know that Len is not one of those people, what you want to do is you want to get an idea as to where in the afternoon, where the western part, where the west is, and you want that to your back so that when you're A, taking photos, you've got the sun behind you, and B, you're most likely going to be in the shade and you're not going to be facing the sun. You don't want to do that while you're watching a parade because, as we all know, you need to stake out your position well in advance of the time the parade starts.
It's a great tip.
Yeah, I mean, being able if you can find shade, which would be ideal. I mean, there's a huge difference between being out in the sun and being in the shade, doing anything, whether it's walking or just viewing the parade. And, the parades, you got to stake out your spot there. I mean, how much time would you say, Scopa, you could be out there for a parade? I mean, getting a spot, watching the parade, and then trying to get to wherever you're going. I mean, you could be somewhere, close to 2 hours out in the elements.
Oh, yeah. Well, I must have about 6 to 8 cast member friends down there who have worked parade detail, and they've told me that they like to see the guests. They usually suggest to guests that for the daytime parade, you stake out your spot at least 1 hour for the daytime parade. And the parade usually lasts 20 to 30 minutes during the day. So you're talking an hour and a half, easily an hour and a half to 2 hours, man. So yeah, so if you're gonna be in one spot outside in the sun for 2 hours, you're gonna feel it. It's gonna drain your energy too.
Absolutely. Now, you want to try to do, if you are going to be out in the parks during the summer months, especially in the afternoon, you're going to want to minimize your exposure to the elements. And, eating, a lot of people, choose to have their sit-down meal for dinner, and then for lunch, during the hottest part of the day, having a counter service meal. And I'm sure many of the counter service meals are in open air, exposed, right out there in the middle of the sun locations. And there are places that you can go to beat the heat in that regard. And I'll give you a studio's example of this. If you're over on Sunset Boulevard, and there's that whole strip of restaurants over there right across from the Beauty and the Beast Theater. And, those restaurants are right out there in the middle of the sun, but there are plenty of great places where you can have covered, air-conditioned meals, counter service meals, at Backlot Express or at Studio Catering Company. Mike Scopa, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, you're talking about, is it called the Sunset Market, Sunset Ranch Market? Is that what it's called?
I believe that's what it's called. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, actually, Matt, the last time, well, I don't know, it wasn't the last time, but I've tried the Backlot Express, and It's actually much cooler over there than I thought it was. As long as you're out of the sun and as long as you're someplace where the air is moving, I think you're okay. One thing that I think is really important, especially for families going for the very first time, is that they need to realize that during the summer months it's very crowded and it's very hot. So it's very difficult sometimes to eat at noon. So in order to beat the heat and to eat wherever you want to do, especially wherever you want to eat, especially at the sit-down restaurants, I usually recommend that they make advanced dining reservations for lunch between 2 and 3 o'clock. That would mean, maybe having a snack in the late morning. By doing it at 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I mean, that's a very, very warm part of the day. You're bound to get a seating without any problem, and you're going to be in a nice air-conditioned environment. And I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
I also think that one thing to keep in mind, a lot of people drink iced tea, and that's a diuretic. And if you're going to drink iced tea, and if you really like iced tea, try to have water with your meal at the same time, because you really, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, Matt, it's very important to keep hydrated all the time. Every couple of hours, have some water, have some fluid, because you won't realize you're getting dehydrated until it's too late. When you're thirsty, it's too late.
What do you think about the water mister fans? A lot of people recommend them for the summer months, but I kind of feel that you're just adding more humidity to the air. I mean, it's a temporary relief, but then you just end up more sticky.
Carol, she uses all these weird devices, and she's used that before. She bought one from the Animal Kingdom where it's a little mister and a fan, and she uses it throughout the day. It really, really helps. And she's got this newfangled thing that she's going to bring that she bought from, here comes an ad, QVC, and it's called a Coolie, and she just soaks this. It looks like a kerchief, and it holds the water, and she puts it around her neck, and it really keeps her cool. So I think that if you think it's helping you and if you feel better, then by all means, go for it.
That's great. And of course, I mean, there's some basic recommendations. I mean, dress light. I mean, some of us like to, be fashionable and everything, but, sometimes, there's a price for that. And personally, I'll wear ugly clothing if I can remain cool during the, be able to tour comfortably. Of course, comfortably is a relative word when you're touring in the middle of August in Walt Disney World. And what are your guys' thoughts about footwear? I know there's two competing camps. One is, well, regardless of what time of the year you go, you should always wear sneakers, well broken in sneakers with socks, so that you're not going to worry about your feet, completely getting all cut up with blisters and whatever. And then there's the other group that says, dude, it's August, I'm going to be wearing flip-flops and any, sandals or... What do you think, Mike Scopa?
Yeah, this is easy for me, Matt. What I wear is I wear running shoes because they're light, because they're comfortable. I also make sure I wear socks, and I also use foot powder just to keep the moisture off the foot and everything. I sometimes will wear sandals, but if I'm going to have a long day, I'm going to want my feet to be really comfortable. So I'm usually wearing running shoes, and they usually have about 100 miles on them, so they've been broken in. I try to do whatever I can to make sure that there's no chance of me, having uncomfortable feet, blisters, or whatever. I think it's very important to take care of your feet.
Mike Newell, are you a sock or a sneaker or a sandal guy?
I'm a sneaker guy all the way. There's nothing worse than having something wrong with your foot while you're at a theme park in the sweltering heat. So I'm with Mike. I'm not the running shoe kind of guy, but basketball shoe, something like that. A well broken in one, but nothing that's too well broken in. Something comfortable.
Absolutely.
Like I said, you have a bad foot, or you have something wrong with your foot, a sore or some sort. It's one of the worst feelings, especially down there.
And speaking of worst feelings, chafing is terrible. I mean, they can just totally destroy your day because all you're thinking about is the chafing. And I would recommend, I think Gold Bond makes some powder for that. There are some creams, and I would just bring along a little one to put in your bag. They're not very heavy at all, and they can. I mean, if you have that, then it can make your life a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Mike Scopa, do you have some tips for some joggers?
Being a runner myself, over the years, I just enjoy running down there, and I've learned what to do and what not to do. The first thing for anyone to keep in mind if they intend to do some running down there is to hydrate the night before they run. And I think that it's important that they realize that in order for them to properly hydrate their body, they need to fill it with fluids at least 12 hours beforehand, so that it gets through all their systems, so they're ready to go the next morning. And I talk about mornings because, let's face it, it's the best time to run. And during the summer months, the sun comes up later down south than it does up north, so you can go out. I mean, I actually, quote, sleep in till 5:30 in the morning down there. I run at 5 up here, but I run at 5:30 to 6 o'clock down there, and the sun has not popped up yet, so it's relatively cool, and it's a great time to run, to get your run in. And what's also nice is that after you run, you can jump in the pool, you can jump in the spa or whatever, and there's nobody around. So it's a great time to get your workout in and then enjoy the rest of the day. You just don't want to run after 10 or 11 in the morning. It's just too much.
One of the things we always...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, the same goes for if you're a golfer, too.
Oh, yeah.
I've played several times down there. We always try to get the very early tee-off time because, like you said, Mike, after 10, 11, it's just brutal.
One of the things we always recommend and implore our listeners to do is to take an afternoon break. So let's define for our listeners what that means exactly. And I'm going to tell you what I personally do, and I'm interested in hear what you guys have, what your guys' opinions are. When I say afternoon break, I'm thinking you're done at the parks by noon. You go back to your resort, and you do not come back out to the parks until sometime between 4 and 5 o'clock, ideally. This is obviously during the summer hours. You're taking advantage of longer hours. What are your guys' feelings?
I agree 100%, Matt. I'll tell you why. Back in 1975 or 76, I can remember Carol and I we did something in the Magic Kingdom, and then we left. It was only the Magic Kingdom back then, and I can remember coming back in and going on top of the train station to take some photographs, and I saw tons and tons and tons of young families coming out of the park. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. They all looked tired. They all looked they all had like sunstroke. Right. The kids were screaming and yelling, and I thought, gee, if they had gone back to the resort or to their hotel, taken a nap, gotten out of the sun, then they could come back about 5 o'clock, refreshed, and enjoy the rest of the day. They missed out on having fun that night. So I agree. Between 12 and 4, try to avoid the parks if you can.
I mean, even an hour break will do wonders for you. I mean, you don't have to take a nap necessarily. I mean, you can just sit in your room and relax, or maybe go to the pool for an hour or two. I mean, an hour off your feet will do wonders for you and, of course, the rest of your family or group, whoever you're traveling with.
Especially if you're doing commando-style touring. I mean,
absolutely.
That doesn't work in the summer.
Mike Newell, what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. One of the things that we always go back to the room, especially if you're staying on property, you're spending so much money to stay on property. We like to go back and enjoy the resort. I know a lot of people say, the parks are the main attraction, and they are in their own extent. But go back and enjoy your own resort. Maybe take out a boat or take out a bicycle. Enjoy the pool. That's what we like to do. And you try to get the best of both worlds, the theme park and the resort. It's not just the park. You want to go in and have fun, at the resort, and that's what we like to do.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. It's like I said, I mean, regardless of what you do at the pool, and that's, of course, the advantage of staying on site. And you mentioned that, Mike Newell, that staying on site, I mean, staying off site will save you money, what have you, but it is infinitely easier to get from the park back to your resort and back again if you're staying on site than off site.
Absolutely. If I'm staying at Old Key West and I'm in Epcot, I could be in my room within 10, 15 minutes. It's really amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just it can really make a world of difference right there.
Well, let me tell you that if I'm in MGM Studios and I'm staying at Scopa Towers, I can be from the moment I've timed this from the moment I turn my ignition on to the moment I get into my room, it's usually 7 minutes from MGM to
it's incredible. And you know, if you're on 192 or iDrive, one of those play, you can get just as exhausted sitting in that traffic than you would be at midday at the Magic Kingdom. So
it's like 30 minutes, Mike, sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're sitting in those traffic lights and the traffic.
And the bus is air conditioned when you get on it. Your car is not, you know. So.
Oh, buses too. You could be back in your resort in minutes with the bus if it's going the right way. It's really, I mean, we take buses as well, and it's amazing.
That's a good tip, Matt. That's a good tip to remind everyone that, you know, if they use the buses, then they'll get quick cool down with the air-conditioned buses, whereas if they're using their car, they have to wait a few minutes before the car cools down. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you play that game of trying to hop in the car at the last possible second, thus minimizing the amount of time that you'll be in the scorching hot car. If any of our listeners, remote starters, go for it. If any of our listeners have extra tips to stay cool in the summer, I implore them all to post them in our show notes at wdwtoday.com. And that's it for us today. This has been episode number 133 of Walt Disney World Today. If you want to find older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, you can visit the Walt Disney World Today website at wdwtoday.com. You can also email us at questions at wdwtoday.com. For Len Testa and Mike Scopa and Mike Newell, I'm Matt Hodgeberg. We'll see you on the next show.